And that's Prime Minister Modi, who has responded to the allegations of a plot to kill Khalistani terrorist Pannun, saying that he will look into any evidence, but a few incidents cannot derail the India-US ties. In an interview with Financial Times, the Prime Minister said, if someone gives us any information, we would definitely look into it. If a citizen of ours has done anything good or bad, we are ready to look into it, is what the Prime Minister is saying, as well as the commitment is to the rule of law. Prime Minister Modi also added that he is deeply concerned about the activities of certain extremist groups based overseas. These elements, under the guise of freedom of expression, have engaged in intimidation and incited violence, is what he said in that interview with Financial Times. According to the Prime Minister, the recent allegations would not affect the ties that India has with the United States. There is a strong bipartisan support for the strengthening of this relationship, which is a clear indicator of a mature and stable partnership. I don't think it's appropriate to link a few incidents with diplomatic relations between the two countries, is what the Prime Minister had to say. This is in connection with the US authorities saying that Nikhil Gupta, an Indian government employee who was codenamed as CC1, exchanged a series of telephonic and electronic communications starting from May this year, in which the latter asked the former to plan the murder. In return, Mr. Gupta was promised assistance in dropping a criminal case against him in India. The two people have had meetings as well in person in Delhi and the United States. Has gone on to say that this is responding to those charges. The External Affairs Ministry had earlier said that India takes such inputs very seriously since they impinge on our national security interests as well. And now the Prime Minister has gone out and reacted to those allegations. We have Brahma Chelani joining us. He is the strategic affairs expert to get us more on this. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us on the broadcast this afternoon. Sir, how is this interview to Financial Times? Has the Prime Minister balanced his concern about extremist forces that operate abroad with India's position that India will look into any evidence that is provided?
You're right. But what he has said, in a sense, echoes what the White House said some days ago. The White House said that the US will continue to work to strengthen the strategic partnership with India, calling that partnership vital for US interests. So what Prime Minister Modi is saying is that while India has deep concerns over the role of Khalistani extremists operating from American soil, the fact is that the relationship, the bilateral relationship, is quite mature, and that the American allegation about the involvement of an Indian government official is not going to seriously impact by the bilateral relationship. So that's the message that both sides are conveying. The issue, though, is that whatever the spin might be from the two governments, the fact is that there are new strains apparent in the bilateral relationship.
Right. Brahma Chelani, how has the Prime Minister made it clear in his interview with Financial Times that freedom of expression cannot justify extremist activity on foreign soil?
The problem for India is this, that in a way, history has come full circle. In the 1980s, India kept requesting Canada to crack down on Canadian Sikh extremists. In fact, just a few weeks before Air India flight was bombed, killing all 329 people on board, India had delivered intelligence to the Canadian government that Khalistan extremists based in Canada were plotting to put bombs in baggage of Air India flights. That is exactly what happened in 1985. And two different Canadian inquiries concluded that Canada-based Khalistan terrorists were behind the twin bombings. There were two different flights that were bombed. One bombing misfired, the other bombing killed everybody on board. So today we are seeing Canada, the US, and the UK, these three countries have become the epicenter of the Khalistan militancy. So in a way, not only is history repeating itself, these recent developments are reopening old Indian wounds. So I think it's very important for the US to understand that despite the effort of the two governments to ensure that the relationship remains largely unaffected, that this issue of Khalistan militants being given a free rein to operate from American, Canadian, and British soil, that is going to impact bilateral ties between these three countries and India.
Right. Sir, what's the significance of the Prime Minister's statement to the Financial Times that one or two such incidents do not affect the course of the relationship that India has with the US?
It's interesting that Prime Minister Modi chose to give an interview to the Financial Times. That was the newspaper that first reported, based on leaks provided by US officials, that the US was investigating credible allegations of an Indian government officials' involvement in an alleged plot, a murder for hire plot. And that US planted story in the Financial Times was clearly an effort to warn India that an indictment was coming. Now, the indictment was then unsealed a few days later, and the whole plot, as mentioned in the indictment, seems to stretch credulity. For example, this Indian government official was based in New Delhi, and the middleman, Mr. Gupta, was also based in New Delhi. Now, these guys, two guys, are based in New Delhi, and they are plotting a murder on American soil. And whom do they allegedly recruit as the killer? An undercover US agent. You know, the whole story seems so difficult to believe, and yet this indictment has cast a shadow over the US-India relationship. And I think that Prime Minister's interview to the Financial Times may convey the message that India wants to maintain strong ties with the US, yet India's concerns over the rising activities of Khalistan extremists who are making open terrorist threats against Indian targets. Targets have included Air India, New Delhi Airport, the Indian Parliament. I'm talking about this gentleman, Mr. Pannun. He's based in New York. He's been making these threats quite openly, and no action has been taken by FBI against him. Or take the twin attacks on the Indian consulate in San Francisco by Khalistan extremists. There were two different attacks last year, and the FBI director, when he was in New Delhi recently, he said FBI is aggressively pursuing investigations into those twin attacks. But the fact is that not a single person has been arrested for those attacks. It's the Indian authorities who have named 10 people as being involved in those attacks, and India has announced cash rewards for information leading to the arrest of these 10 individuals. So if there has been any action, it has been from the Indian side, not from the FBI side. So these issues are not going to be easily forgotten. You can't brush these issues under the carpet. And I think that while Prime Minister Modi is right to emphasize the importance of the bilateral relationship and to say that India still wishes to maintain strong ties with the US, yet the growing activities of Khalistan militants operating from Canadian, American, and British soil, that's an issue that is of deep concern to India.
Right. Thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast. And like you mentioned, India is, like the Prime Minister did speak about in his interview with Financial Times, that few incidents cannot derail our relationship is what the Prime Minister spoke on the US-India ties. If someone gives us any information, we would definitely look into it, is what the Prime Minister mentioned in that interview. If a citizen of ours has done anything good or bad, we're ready to look into it. And relationship with the United States is mature and stable, is what the Prime Minister told Financial Times.